So first things first, what are you looking forward to today?
Certifying President Trump's historic election.
Do you think that this is going to look anything like what the certification looked like 4 years ago?
Well, clearly not, and the weather is the first obvious look. We got a lot of snow here in Washington. D.C. schools are shut down, the D.C. government is closed, the federal government is closed. Only basically Congress and our limited staff are here to certify the election.
In terms of what things are going to look like later today, Kamala Harris isn't expected to object to any of the certification proceedings. I mean, what do you think that speaks to Trump's election and the broader context here?
It was absolutely historic. I mean, let's look at the two elections. They're vastly different. The election of 2020 happened during COVID lockdowns and shutdowns, and absentee ballots were used historically. Even I would say constitutionally wrong. They shouldn't have been used the way they were used. This election, it was a completely different scenario in 2024. Every state was wide open, and the Republican Party took a very deep engagement on election integrity, which I think is incredibly important. The numbers are huge. President Trump received the most votes of any Republican presidential candidate in history, 312 Electoral College votes. So I don't think there's anything to argue about, but I, of course, stand for election integrity. So if anybody wanted to take a look into it, I'd be standing right there saying, yeah, let's take a look into it.
In that vein, are you aware of any challenges to the electoral count expected later today?
No, I'm not. And Democrats had changed the law in 2022, making it much harder to object to any state's electoral votes. So previously in 2020, I was one of the main people that planned the objection. We only needed one House member and one senator to join together to object per state. They changed the law in 2022, requiring 1/5 members from the House and requiring a half of all senators to object to a single state. So it's a much harder basically goal to get past to be able to object.
Are you opposed to that change?
Yeah, I am opposed, actually. I really stand with the people. The elections belong to the people. They pay for the elections through their tax dollars. It's their votes that have to be tallied properly. And I think we have serious problems in our elections. I believe in paper ballots. I believe in making it a much simpler process. And I believe that we've got to make it as transparent as possible.
You've spoken in favor of some of the pardons for people who were arrested on January 6th 4 years ago. I'm just curious, do you believe those pardons should be just for nonviolent offenders or really anyone who was here at the Capitol?
I definitely believe that they should all be pardoned. Especially, let's look at the comparison. BLM and Antifa, over 95% of their charges were dropped. They were never prosecuted, never treated the way January 6th defendants have been treated. January 6th defendants, people that protested and rioted at the Capitol on January 6th of 2021, I think it's basically a 100% prosecution rate. And they were treated unbelievably horrific. We're talking 22 to 24 hours a day in solitary confinement in the Washington, D.C. jail and other jails and prisons across the country before they were ever convicted. I know that for a fact because I was one of the only members of Congress that went in and saw them in 2021. Also, BLM and Antifa riots happened night after night without fail for an entire summer, destroying over $2 billion in property, attacking police officers, over 93 police vehicles burned, federal courthouses attacked, monuments attacked, and businesses and communities absolutely destroyed, burned, and ravaged. This was one day. It was one day here at the Capitol, and the people were protesting their election, and these people were politically persecuted for it. So I think there's a clear difference, and we should never allow this to happen again in our country.
But what's your message to those, members of law enforcement who were, hurt, injured during January 6th, trying to keep people from entering the Capitol complex?
My message to them is the same thing as the police officers that were attacked every single night by BLM and Antifa, is we thank them for their service. They have one of the hardest jobs in America. Police officers endure every type of horrible part of humanity. They're the ones that show up first to scrape bodies off of the pavement when they've been killed or injured in a car accident. They show up at people's homes when families are having terrible arguments, fights, or even murders. They're the ones that show up and find the bodies overdosed on fentanyl or other drugs, and they deal with people when they lose control during protests and riots. So I always thank our police officers, and I always support them.
But if they were hurt or injured, the people who hurt or injured them should not face accountability?
What about the police officers that were hurt and injured? Did any of those people face accountability? No. Over 95% of BLM and Antifa rioters got their charges dropped, and they walked free. And their families did not have to endure politically weaponized persecution. So I would ask you, how fair is that?
So you view the two as equivalent then?
What I view is a complete injustice in America that should have never happened in the first place.
Gotcha. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Yep, you
Appreciate
bet.
your time.
Yep.